Going green by going high-tech. The agency in charge of greening Singapore is using new gizmos and gadgets to restore the island's forests. It's also not letting up on a pledge to plant 1 million trees by 2030.
Sustainability and the Environment Minister Grace Fu on Facebook marked International Day of the Forest, saying that the government will continue to transform the island into a city in nature. And for more, we have with us Lim Liang Jim. He is Group Director of Conservation at the National Parks Board.
Thanks for coming in this evening, Mr. Lim. Okay, 1 million trees by 2030. Where are we on that? Well, 6 years away. Are we close to meeting that?
We are actually very close to meeting it already. As at January 2024, we have, together with the help of the community, 100,000 members of the community. We have already planted 640,000 trees. So based on that trajectory, we are looking at reaching 1 million trees net in the ground by the year 2027. That's 3 years ahead of schedule.
And checking very quickly, the survival rate is good.
The survival rate is good because of the selection of the trees, right? Okay. So if we select the trees which are already large enough so that they can establish themselves well and they can be resilient to the changes in the weather that we experience over time, they will actually do quite well when planted in the ground.
So that's great progress and achieved by corporates as well as engagement with the community.
Yes.
NParks also aims to complete this 300 kilometres of natureways by the year 2030, Mr. Lim. Can you share with us the progress on that?
Yes, we have already reached 210 kilometres of natureway planting. And natureway planting is really a very nice story. When you're talking about Singapore, it's 720 square kilometres. We have 5 million people in it. We are actually a first world economy. We don't really have a hinterland to basically have very large forests, right? So what we aim to do, and this is a very compelling vision, is to essentially have a first world economy nestled within a matrix of greenery. So the whole island becomes the forest, right? So Natureways is part of that because the planting structure is extremely unique. I was at your lobby downstairs and I could look out and see the center divider. 4 structures. There's the emergent layer where you have the tallest trees, you have the middle canopy layer, you have shrubs, and then you have ground cover. And that's so useful because it provides a lot of living space for birds and butterflies who will then pollinate and then disperse the seeds. So it actually emulates a forest structure at your roadside, which is very nice to see.
All right, the theme for World Forestry Day this year is forests and innovation, new solutions for a better world. But what you were just talking about, these are not new solutions. We have known for the longest time that as far as we can enmesh ourselves and nature, the better the rate of success will be. So when you talk about new solutions, what might these be?
Right. Well, it's in terms of technology as well as processes. Now, when we're talking about, for example, natureway planting, it's actually based on scientific fact, right? So it's been published and it's known. However, to apply it, it's very difficult. And in Singapore, essentially, well, because it's not easy. It takes time to basically put them in. You need to maintain a different suite of plants rather than just, trees and then underneath grass, right? So it really does take a lot of commitment to basically make sure that this happens, to make sure that over time we look after and maintain these structures so that they can essentially grow in a sustainable way. So Singapore does that. Technological innovation in terms of processes, but we also apply technology. So our main priority for me is to make sure that Singapore's forests, and they are actually not very large, right? They will be able to grow and enhance and reforest themselves naturally and sustainably. So what we are looking in terms of technology is to put in place surveys over the long term. So we have instituted long-term survey plots within our Central Catchment Nature Reserve, and we are using high-tech like camera traps. We're using night vision devices, which are not actually commonly used elsewhere in the world. We are using things like acoustic sensors because a lot of the animals that pollinate and disperse all these forest plants, they fly, they occur at night. In fact, a large percentage of them occur only at night. So we need to have the technology to find out what's there, what's actually pollinating our forest plants? What's actually dispersing the seeds that come out so that the forest can actually regenerate organically and naturally? So we do put in a lot of technology into finding out what critters are there right now and how we can conserve them better and protect them better.
Yeah, there's a lot of data that still needs to be collected.
Absolutely that.
So now that you've mentioned the divider outside the MediaCorp lobby, I'm going to be taking a much closer look at it.
Yeah.
But, you know, here in Singapore, we treasure our nature, we treasure the gardens that we have in our urban, you know, sort of environment. Do we really need to encourage people to enjoy those nature reserves and, you know, sort of urban gardens even more?
Yes, there is already great uptake. And I like to point out that example of, for example, during the worst days of COVID, right, when we had the lockdown, if Singapore didn't have our forests and our green spaces, and yet we were unable to travel outside of Singapore, you know, we as a society would have been doing much worse, I would say. So right now, with the benefit of what we had over decades of planting, greening, making sure our parks are nice, making sure we had nice forests and parks to enjoy ourselves in, we had seen essentially the results of all that sort of motivation, that sort of vision, when during COVID, you know, people were able to go and enjoy themselves in green spaces without having the ability to travel overseas. So I think Singaporeans do appreciate this, but we are of course doing more, right? So throughout our parks and our green spaces, our botanic gardens, my nature reserves, there will be lots of learning journeys. We have a lot of guided walks. We have a lot of arts and crafts activities to essentially teach, especially the younger generation, how to appreciate the fact that Singapore started as a garden city, and that vision has carried on. And not only has it perpetuated, but it's evolved such that we are now aiming to be a city in nature. It's a very compelling vision, right? First world economy, infrastructure, nestled within a nature.
But it seems like a multi-level effort. So from the very start, just as one example, you want trees, enough trees to survive. So earlier we were speaking the choice of trees.
Right.
What, in terms of what works in our environment? So get the right tree, and then make sure that the maintenance is there, that it continues living. And then you're talking about all these high-tech devices to ensure that it's able to pollinate itself, as an example. And finally, educating people so that where they can help, they can do more to help their own environment. If you split all these things up, which takes the greatest priority in terms of we want to keep our forests alive, growing, becoming even better?
I think the very important thing is to make sure that as a community, the whole of Singapore understands this vision and buys into this vision, which is why we have programs like 1 Million Trees, which basically takes a lot of input from the community, gets the community down onto the ground, gets them planting the trees, sometimes kids with parents and all. And it's very important so that no matter what, right, we don't lose sight of this vision, right, that we had ever since 1965, in fact, before that, 1963. And I think the saying is that you can only protect what you love, you can only love what you know, and you can only know what you are taught. And I think we are doing a lot in trying to teach the younger generation that this is what Singapore should be. This is what the vision of Singapore is, a city in nature, and not to lose that mind share, and to build it into the Singapore DNA that we are supposed to be Singapore, a city in nature.
Thank you, Mr. Lim, for coming in this evening and doing your part to keep that vision alive.
Great
Mr.
pleasure.
Lim
Thank you so much.
Liang Jim, Group Director of Conservation at the National Parks Board. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.